Welcome to the Smoke and Rope Podcast, episode 29. I'm your host, Ryan Basore, and today I'm excited to have on a friend and lobbyist, Kevin McKinney from McKinney Associates. Kevin, thanks for being on.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And over, as always, in Lansing, Kevin over at Truu Cannabis. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning, guys.
Or afternoon.
Yeah. It's an early one for us, a noon start time. So
Yeah.
excited to talk to Kevin today. Always love chatting with him.
And Tom Beller at Real Leaf Solutions. What's happening, Tom?
Afternoon. Oh, snow, and more snow up here, man. It's
Nice.
great.
About time. Well, today, a lot of people, as we always do, I give a little longer introduction and talk about people's roles and Michigan cannabis history. And I'm excited to talk about Kevin's because there's all these new lobbyists, new people, and everyone's coming in, jumping on board. But Kevin McKinney is the first, in my opinion, cannabis lobbyist in Michigan for as far as that, and has helped Truu. So in 2011, I first met Kevin. My good buddy Bob Beldori was helping me introduce to lobbyists we were going to hire for the MAC, our first association, and we interviewed Kevin and it was Karub, GCSI, a bunch of the different ones, and definitely felt Kevin was the right person for the job, and obviously he was. That was one of the better decisions I've made in hiring consultants or lobbyists over the years. But then Kevin got really involved in with the MAC, and then that kind of disbanded, and worked really close with Robin Schneider. Has been there every step of the way from 2011 till today. Every single bill that's gone down in Lansing, statewide, Kevin's been involved with it and knows about the history way more than we do. So it's you can definitely get to pick his brain on that. And on a personal note, a couple things, Kevin, we want to talk about it as far as believing in cannabis. Kevin had a pretty scary bout of with cancer and used cannabis, and I see him on Facebook now, climbing rocks and mountains, stuff I can't dream of doing. So I'm thinking he's feeling pretty good. And then one of the things people don't know about, and you'll never hear Kevin talk about it, is when we got really attacked by Bill Schuette and stores had to shut down and nobody had money. Kevin kept lobbying for us without getting paid for a long time. So most people wouldn't do that, and that's something I'll never forget, and people should know about it, but I know Kevin's not going to toot his own horn. So with that, Kevin, tell us about you and your company, and let's get into the start of 2011 and take it from there.
Great. Thank you very much. Really a pleasure to be on. I will tell you, this is the second time I've worn a tie since March of 2020. Not only because of this, but I do have a meeting at the Capitol. First time an in-person meeting that requires a tie. So my multi-client lobbying firm is McKinney Associates. I've been in this legislative political arena since 1979. So I'm pushing 41 years involved over at the Capitol. It's a multi-client lobbying firm. I represent a number of different organizations and interest groups, quite heavily involved in the healthcare arena with representing osteopathic physicians, rehab providers, brain injury folks, auto no fault, business groups, including in the past, the Lansing Regional Chamber of Commerce. And as you said, I got involved actually through your introduction with MAC. I like to tell the story that I was probably the last firm that was interviewed for the job that didn't turn it down. And,
no. We had some good offers.
Okay. But what I want to stress with you is that, I really wanted to be conflict-free with my client portfolio. So I did go to the osteopathic physicians, MOA, and asked them, and they did not see any sort of conflict representing at that time medical marijuana. Shortly after I really began working for you guys, I was diagnosed with, as you indicated, stage 4 throat cancer, which pretty much hung me up for for the better part of a year, although I continued to work, but for probably a month of that time. And, I was going to the U of M Cancer Center and going through my treatments, and it was quite extensive treatments between chemo and radiation in the throat, which caused me to not be able to eat. And, with cancer patients, they fill you full of narcotics between oxycontin, and morphine, to the point where you're really barely functioning besides the side effects. So really through the exposure of you guys and Robin Schneider, I turned to my attending physician and my physicians at the U of M Cancer Center and said, I am going to get off of all these pain meds and I'm going to take medical marijuana. And I used a tincture through a feeding tube that went into my belly. And it was very effective. And I can't tell you, just in terms of relaxing me, providing some ability to laugh or smile, sleep better. So all the things you're aware of. So I became not only a paid lobbyist, but a true believer. And I think that's a little bit of the difference and why I think that, quite honestly, I worked so hard for the cause, was because I could empathize with all the other patients that were fighting to have safe access to medical marijuana. So it was a very strange and ironic start in this field, but certainly one that was well worth it and quite long, in fact, in terms of getting our first bill enacted into law.
You want to talk about that? The first one was really 2014. I was in, I believe I was in federal prison. I I have like a blank window in my time gap of Michigan politics because I wasn't here, but I was watching it and getting visitors, and telling me what's going on. So actually, I'd love to hear a little bit more about 14.
Yeah,
I know we started with we raised money for Mike Colton in 12 and started working with Mike, but
Yeah, so really, once the compassion centers folded up, we reconstituted under National Patient Rights Association, and Robin was our legislative director and really our chief strategist and leader. And we went to Mike Colton, Representative Colton, who was at that time a first termer, and that was in May of 2012, and he introduced the first version of that bill, 5580, which is not really relevant. But there was no committee action for the rest of that year, which ended that legislative session. At that time, I was the only cannabis lobbyist, and there was really nobody else at the Capitol lobbying this particular issue. We reintroduced the bill with modifications early next session, and that bill, along with kind of a companion bill which dealt with the regulating the infused products, was introduced by Representative Eileen Colwell. I'll tell a little bit about that in a second, but I was really proud of the fact that we got that 4271 passed out of the House by a 95-14 vote, which at that time was the largest margin of support in any state house in the country. And so we really felt we had great momentum. It went over to the Senate, which was referred to the Senate Government Ops Committee, which was chaired by the Senate Majority Leader. And why that's important is if the leader agrees with your proposal and it's in his committee and he reports it out, you got a pretty good chance that it's going to pass that chamber. The bill was reported out of committee, and I think in August, and unfortunately, we had to wait till the lame duck, and I think it was the last day of the lame duck of that session, when we were really anticipating a vote, and a couple of things happened. One is the law enforcement agencies and groups came in with a a letter strongly opposing the legislation. It was kind of spearheaded by the sheriffs, the police chiefs, and the prosecutors. But it had all the makings and marks of from Oakland County Sheriff Mike Bouchard, who, as you know, was a former colleague and served in the Senate. And that eroded some of our support that last day of session. And then Eileen Colwall, who was the representative who had the infused products legislation, was running for Oakland County Commission and needed Sheriff Bouchard's support. So she withdrew her support for her own bill the last day of session, which really took the air out of our effort, even though her husband was the majority floor leader. So we had to make a very tough decision at that day, and that was to take a vote on it, realizing we were going to lose, or just let it die a natural death and come back next session. And that was agonizing for many of the advocates that were so upset. And I remember their faces, and I remember the lunch that day talking about it, the pros and cons of losing it and losing it this way. And we just decided that better to go into the new session without that vote. So again, we rolled in Mike Colton, but made a change, which I think was the real game changer. And that was including Representative Lisa Posthumous Lyons, who was in the leadership in the Republican Majority Caucus. Her father was the former Lieutenant Governor Dick Posthumous, who was then working as a senior advisor for Governor Snyder. And Lisa was a true believer in medical marijuana and the efficacy of it, and reintroduced Representative Eileen Colwall's bill and really became a driving partner for Colton in getting this thing through. And the only challenges we had, and there were a lot, but was the fact that at this time, every cannabis interest hired up a lobbyist.
Yeah.
So in the previous two sessions, it was kind of Robin and I making decisions, negotiating with law enforcement in municipalities and townships and the administration. This time, just about every lobbying firm in Lansing had client interest. And all of them were really not trying to necessarily play fair. They were playing to get their own clients to have an advantage. So there were a lot of frustrating moments that we had to overcome, but we ended up doing so thanks to Mike Colton and Representative Lyons, and got through, and the governor signed the 3-bill package. And quite honestly, that moment, probably I'm one of the most proud of all my 40 plus years in Lansing. It's one of the hardest fights I've ever had. It was one that I truly, truly believe in. And, you know, we were really fighting for the patients and their families. So, you know, worked very closely with Ida Lee, who's now with MICIA, and her late daughter, Bella. And so that made the real difference in you know, never giving up. So that's the story of that. I really didn't get involved in the ballot initiative in the beginning. I kind of felt that my clients were okay with medical marijuana, but were a little bit more sketchy on adult use. And I was not really of great value in the petition signature gathering phase anyways. However, after the coalition had submitted their signatures, you know, the legislature has a 40-day window to adopt it.
Yep.
And at that time, we were hearing that the Senate Majority Leader, Arlen Meekhoff, had designs to adopt it and make changes for some interests that he was close to.
Yep.
So I got hired by the coalition and hired by MPP to fight any legislative adoption. And we were successful, especially with convincing the House and Speaker Leonard not to do it.
Yeah.
And then after it passed in November, once again, we had to make sure to protect it from any sort of legislative interference.
And most people don't know about that, Kevin, because like that's like for someone like me, you know, I had a lot of friends on the drafting committee, obviously, and would talk to them, and they like, what do you want, Ryan? I'm like, you gotta allow marijuana felons to participate, you know, and like things like that. And I truly believe any version that would have got picked up and changed, I'd be right back out of on the streets and not be allowed to participate. So really thankful on that. And then on another point, which really upset me, it kind of got me stirred up about kind of like what I thought, how government worked. You know, I had a rude awakening in 2010 on. Now I accept it. I see a lot of other people have rude awakenings on how government works. But they always say, hey, if you don't like it, change the law. I hear that from cops all the time. Girl, don't like it, change it. So we went to change it, and you mentioned some stuff, but I also know of fully dressed cops going into gyms before the vote and doing intimidation practices and lobbying, using our money, you know, the tax revenue that they pay to lobby against it. So like that always really bugged me. You made me think about it, but awesome. So I know Kevin had something Pybus, but yeah, thank you for protecting the
Sure.
Prop 1.
Yeah, you know, just to touch on what you guys were just talking about, I remember a police officer coming into one of my city council meetings in my local town in his uniform and just spouting a bunch of nonsense as if it was fact. And when you looked around the room, it was kind of crazy. Like I saw people like nodding their head in agreement with him. And I'm just like, this is insanity. You know what I mean? Like we pay these guys salary to come to lobby against me in his uniform as if that authenticates his opinion. I've always thought that was kind of an odd thing. I also have always thought, like you said, Ryan, when you talk about, you know, an epiphany, an eye-opening experience with politics, when I started in politics and working with Kevin and whatnot, when I saw that the Police Officers Association, the state police, the county sheriffs, the prosecutors all had lobbyists there every single day lobbying on behalf of their agenda, that was mind-blowing. That to me was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? I mean, these people, their job is to enforce law, not write law, not to interpret law, but to enforce law. And so I still can't fully wrap my head around how that whole situation works. That being said, I did want to, you know, talk to Kevin a little bit about our history. I met Kevin it was probably around 2013. We were working on the state legislation to try to get something passed. I was one of the people that couldn't have been more disappointed when we had to withdraw our bill and not vote on it and wait out for the next governmental session. It was probably one of the most disappointing moments of my life. We'd worked so hard to get to where we were at, and it was like we had thought we had it, and then to not. You know, it kind of made us all, I think about what our futures were and how to proceed forward. But one person that did not stop, that was Kevin. You know, every time I went to a city council meeting or a zoning meeting, anything with the city of Lansing, anything with the state of Michigan, I always saw Kevin McKinney there. And I got to tell you, you're probably one of the most honest, trustworthy guys I've ever met in my life. You've treated me so well in our relationship, working on trying to get things through not only the city of Lansing, but the state. And you never had to do any of that. You didn't have to back me when you did. I think that I just think that goes back to your character. You know, we spent so much time reading bill after bill after bill and proposal and chopping them up and trying to find where they were trying to slide things in. You know, one thing for me, I've questioned my motivation to continue doing politics, but you've been doing this for 41 years. What is it that gets you up every single day? I mean, you don't have to do this. I see, like Ryan said, I see you climbing mountains, spending time with your kids, which is absolutely, I think that's great. But what is it that keeps you going, man? We got past the hurdles. You know, we got over the city stuff. We got over the state stuff. You know, what keeps you going every day, Kevin?
Yeah, sure. Well, one is I still enjoy it. It's still a challenge. Although I will tell you this past year, probably more on the national scene, but it's really filtered down to the state level. It's pretty draining for somebody in my business. It's draining for anybody if they're following it, but really draining if you're in it every day. But it really is a passion of mine to solve problems. And what I'm finding is I'm getting kind of in my final chapters of my career. And I'm not going to retire anytime soon, but I'm thinking about it. I take on projects that I believe in. And I think that's a big difference. So I don't take on projects, just for the money, but really try to take on challenges to better a situation. We played a role in the clean slate legislation. And I'm proud to say that MICIA was the only cannabis association that fought and supported that package. And it was a great package. And it's issues like that I think really keep me going. But I like to do the other things that you just mentioned too. So I like to get out of my comfort zone and rock climb and do some of the other adventurous things. So, I have balance like everybody's supposed to have. And, I'll keep going until somebody says I'm too old or too marginalized. One thing I wanted to raise with you both, you raised your concerns with the police that were going to high school gyms and hearings. And, the police, certainly the police organizations certainly have a right to have lobbyists and have a voice in policy. We, like you, Kevin, I've always said, look, at you enforce whatever is statute. And so that was kind of an initial emotional pushback that I always had. But we were able to, in a few circumstances, get the badge number of some of these officers that were intimidating, whether it was a presenter, some public hearing, a forum on the ballot initiative. And Robin and I did go to the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, and they did start some preliminary investigation. And they were very concerned about the role of some of these individuals. So I don't know, quite honestly, what came of it, but obviously we prevailed in that initiative. I will tell you this, that in the end, all the law enforcement officers cared about was money. They wanted money and their cut of the pie. And once they realized that we were winning, that was all that's how they were leveraging their neutrality on the issues.
Well, I feel like it's not only money; it's also job security. We didn't get that legislation passed if it wasn't going to include roadside sobriety checks for the mouth swab. To me, that's just another level of denial. We've had several tests done by the NTSB, and they've not been able to conclusively prove that cannabis actually impairs your driving more than the minimum threshold for alcohol. So, we've got the state police lobbying for mouth swabs, yet we have no evidence to prove that you really are impaired, so to speak. So, that's where I have a little bit of a problem. Like you said, it also is money. That's also a problem to me as well. But, you had mentioned that, you've been doing this for 41 years. In 41 years, the lobbyists stay, right? But the House reps and the senators, they term out and they get replaced, and the governors get replaced. We're seeing in politics in today's world where we're seeing a lot of arguing, a lot of dishonesty about reporting on politics and what's actually going on. You being an honest guy, again, what motivates you? I mean, it's like running your head into a brick wall, man. I feel like you being an honest guy, that's got to be heartbreaking at times.
Well, it's heartbreaking at times. I've tried to maintain my ethical standards, and in my business, you're only as good as your word. So I can only give my word, and if some information changes, I have to go back to that legislator. What I have found is because of term limits, it's much more transactional. What I mean by that is the trusting long-term relationships where you would build after 6 or 8 years with these legislators. You would know their family, know their interests, maybe go to their weddings and those sorts of things. That's pretty rare now. Usually a legislator, you kind of work with them for the 6 years, the 8 years in the Senate, and they're gone, or maybe they move on to a different elected position. But, you know, there's still some good, hardworking, honest, well-intentioned people in the legislature as well as in the lobbying corps. I just think that it's hyper partisan. There's too much money in the system, and I don't see any way out of that in the near future. So it is frustrating at times. You know, ironically, I talked to a bunch of lobbyists in the past about starting a lobbyist association, which many states have, that would be like the state bar, where we would be working under certain business practices, and we'd have to do so much pro bono work. And it was kind of a, you know, I think there were a number of firms that liked the idea, and then there were a number of firms that were strongly opposed to it. So it never really got any traction, but I'd love to see that happen someday in Michigan.
Yeah, that's extremely refreshing to hear. You don't hear too many people come out and, you know, let's set some standards for ethics in the industry. You know, the industry that you're in is lobbying and helping things, you know, pass through on special interests. But I guess that kind of leads into my question. First of all, I want to say thank you for everything that you have done. We are eternally grateful for your hard work. So with the special interest now, you've seen it all with cannabis, from medical to recreational to now that there's an industry, and it happened pretty fast, I'd say. I guess my question is, what do you see as the major hurdles moving forward as a lobbyist and us as an industry, now that we're getting away from convincing people that medical cannabis works? We know that, you know that firsthand, and people are getting more and more accustomed to that. Recreational cannabis comes to a personal rights issue, and but now that there's an industry, now it's different. It's no longer like, okay, we can all get behind the plant and rah the plant. And now that things are open, what do you see as being the major obstacles for us as an industry that we are going to have to overcome?
It's a very good question. I would say to minimize the greed and avarice in the industry. So when you look at what kind of the overarching mission statement of MICIA is, it's really to provide a level playing field for people to get into the industry, right? And we will continue to be challenged by moneyed interests that are always going to try to want to advantage themselves in this emerging industry. And I think the fact that we'll have to continue to push back, whether it's legislative, administrative rules, or transactional relationships in the legislature. I think that's going to be there for a while until we have a more stable association. I'm not association, but industry. I'm really excited, quite honestly, to help the industry and the association grow, because I think that MICIA can be the most powerful, influential interest group in the state. And I'd love to be part of that. And I think it can happen. And I look at how the beer and wine wholesalers have worked in Lansing and Michigan. And I think we can even be more influential, more provide, you know, more charitable. I don't know what their charitable giving is, but when you talk about, you know, criminal justice reforms, equity programs, social justice issues, charitable giving in your community, I think you guys have, you know, a real great opportunity to advance the industry, your companies, and the product. And I look at A couple little ways I think that the opinions are changing about cannabis. And one is a personal one with my family, my elders, my uncles. My father was a big fan of it, especially medical marijuana. But my uncles who are in their 80s are very supportive, really without encouraging them or coaching them. And I look at, I represent the Michigan Osteopathic Association, and I do a lot of presentations to the medical students, interns, and residents. And obviously the interns and residents have a far greater interest in understanding cannabis as a plant, its medical use, its efficacy, than some of the older physicians, obviously. But I think that's very promising for the industry as a whole. And I use that as a litmus test to say that I think we're really coming around. And MICIA did a candidate survey, both in the primary election and followed up in the general election. And we graded the candidates on what they thought about cannabis. And those that obviously returned their surveys were all in the B pluses and A's. Now, obviously those that opposed it perhaps threw it away. But, and this was not with, any promise of endorsement or money. So I think once our association builds up a PAC and maybe decides they want to start endorsing, I think you'll get those surveys back, and I think you're going to find very, very strong support in the legislature for cannabis.
That's been fun to see. We talk about that a lot. We started off even pre hiring you, Kevin. Jeff Irwin would talk to us. Verge would talk to us downtown some, and then eventually we got. The story goes, we met with Dennis Sharnack and Richard McClellan.
Yeah.
And they told us to get a Republican by our side, and then met Mike Calton with Todd and Helen Pryor, and Robin was there. And long story, but pretty wild. And to see what you just said with the MICIA being the most powerful lobby firm, which I think it can be. And that's one of the great things about Michigan is our lobbying firm that does have the most influence, the most relationships, is a group of good people that are caring about the plan and the patients and getting everyone involved, which, for most states, that is not the case. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. So that is awesome. I did want to bring this up because I think it goes without saying, and Kevin's a modest guy, doesn't talk about it much, but Kevin was the and still is the lobbyist for the Lansing Guild in Lansing, and through his relationships and a great job, a lot of the Lansing Guild guys got provisionally center license, which is really cool for me to see because they're guys from the industry and they grew up, a lot of them here or around here. So it's not like that in most other cities. So tell us a little bit about the Lansing Guild, and if you want
Sure.
the history with that, because we originally started a Lansing Guild. It was way back in the day. It was me, Shakina, Brant Johnson, and Robin. And then, so this is the second coming. So I like to throw that out.
Well, obviously, after the legislation passed, MMFLA, we set our sights on Lansing. And at that time, I think there was probably over 80 plus dispensaries at that time. Some good, some bad, some pushing stuff out the back door that was questionable. And I know you had Verge on 2 weeks ago, or whatever, and he has his own take on it as well. But we realized that we had to have some control over this in our community, especially as individuals were making substantial capital investments and going for a state license. So there was a few of us that got together and formed the Lansing Medical Cannabis Guild and really worked on putting together a draft ordinance, and worked with Verge and a few of the city council people at that time and kind of paved the way to get it introduced. That was a very challenging effort. Kevin knows, he was in all of our meetings and it's at City Hall. You know, there were a lot of neighborhoods that had some bad experiences with some of these dispensaries and some caregivers in the neighborhoods that weren't probably as responsible as they should be. And, you know, we finally got an ordinance that wasn't perfect, but was one that we could agree to, that when adopted would allow for individuals to apply and put their best foot forward. I think that was almost equally challenging as at the Capitol, but I'm real pleased with the progress and success of our guild members. We're kind of looking at how to expand the guild, really working with other community organizations and business organizations. I know that a few of you on this call, both Kevin and Ryan, are members of the Lansing Regional Chamber of Commerce. I think that's great. They've really pivoted on their position on cannabis. You know, initially they were very opposed to an ordinance. They reluctantly supported an ordinance really to reduce the number of dispensaries on Michigan Avenue, to now that they are supporting the efforts of the Redemption Foundation to approach Lansing Community College to establish some programs for training. And that's obviously your baby, Ryan. And I think that's a phenomenal endeavor. And I'm glad that your foundation and the chamber are going to work together with the city and hopefully LCC to move that forward.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And thanks. I didn't mention that. Kevin's also a advisory board member on my foundation and does a lot of great work for that, and super appreciative, you know, of that as well.
I got one, if nobody has any other questions, I got one thing I'd like to share with people. And it's really another defining moment in my my 40 plus years, probably one of the most difficult things I've had to do. And that was in 2014, I got invited by Mark Passerini to speak at the Hash Bash. And I wasn't really sure about it. I'd never been to a Hash Bash before. He had some wonderful speakers, so I was a little intimidated by that lineup. But really, it was to just kind of give a rah-rah speech. The bill had passed the House. Was really to tell all the people in the crowd to reach out to their senators and tell them to take action on the bill. But Mark said, you got 3 minutes, no more. And so I really took that to heart and wrote what I thought was a very focused speech. I gave it to my brother, who is a writer. I told him to edit it. He edited it down. I read it over and over. I practiced it in the mirror. I had it. It was in my breast pocket. So when I got standing behind the microphone, waiting for my name to be called up, a few advocates before me were called up, and they just walked up and spoke from the heart. And they did a phenomenal job. And the MC, and I can't remember who it was at the time, it wasn't Mark, said, see, that's the type of advocates we have in Lansing. They don't need any notes. They speak from the heart. So I'm going, oh shit, you know, what am I going to do? So the next one came up and she had a speech, a written speech. So she takes it, throws it up in the air and says, I don't need a speech. This is what I'm going to say, and delivers a beautiful speech. I get called up. Well, I was not going to pull out my speech, but I hadn't memorized it. So I stood up there in front of the microphone, looked out, and froze. And what probably seemed like 5 minutes was maybe 10 seconds until somebody coughed, you know, in the front row. And then I ad-libbed it and then kind of came around to my main message points. But that was probably, and I've given a lot of speeches and testified, but that was probably leading up to that, one of the most challenging things I had to do. And afterwards, I remember after I gave it, calling home to my mom and dad and talking about it, and just so excited that I gave a speech. In fact, I posted it on Facebook, giving it, and still look at that picture once in a while. And so that was a very memorable moment during this journey.
Awesome.
So.
Yeah, Kevin, I've given quite a few, testimonies, whether it's to city councils or at the state, and it's intimidating. You know what I mean? It kind of catches you off guard. You think you're all prepared. You step up there, and all of a sudden you're like, oh no, what do I do? But yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. Every time I've gotten into a situation like that, I just kind of, like you said, throw your notes out the window and just speak from the heart. And what's great about that is people realize that you're speaking from the heart, and it just gives you credibility.
Right.
Something that you've definitely earned over your years. Real quickly, I wanted to go back to the guild situation. I am a member of the guild, as Ryan is, and worked with you for a lot of years. And the thing that I want people to understand is that in just being a member of the guild and working with you did not just guarantee anything. This was a long, hard battle. And what you did is you used your 41 years of expertise to put us in the right position in the right places to make things happen. At the end of the day, we still had to work, and we still had to make those relationships. We still had to talk things through. We still had to work really hard to get where we were at. There was nothing handed to us, but if not for you putting us in those positions, it would have never happened. Prime example is the Chamber of Commerce. Not a lot of people know. You're one of the only people that probably does know that I've been a member of the Chamber of Commerce for 8 years as a cannabis business. I was the first cannabis business to be a member of the Chamber of Commerce. It was right at the time when they were willing to start to kind of talk about things, and lining us up with legitimate businesses, putting us on the invitations and on the presenters note cards or whatever it might be next to those legitimate businesses. What earned us legitimacy. So I just wanted to point that out, because I think that there are some people that have a misconception thinking that just because you belong to a certain group or have a certain lobbyist, that just means that you paid for something and then just got something for nothing. And I just want to clarify that is absolutely not how it works.
Yeah, good clarification.
That's a great point, Kevin. And that's one thing I always, when I used to, I know some other good lobbyists now that I think are good people, but I used to tell people about Kevin, and you don't know this. Kevin's like, yeah, he's a lobbyist, but he's like the only good one I've ever, the only honest one I've ever met. So like, pretty clue, like, oh no, you can talk to him. He's cool. But like, so anyways, but we're running out of time. Obviously we're all buddies here, could talk forever, but wanted to give everyone a chance to say goodbye. Any final thoughts? So go ahead, Kevin. Pybus.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Kevin again. I usually take this time to pour my heart out to our guests about what they've done for us. But I talked to Verge last week. I carried a lot of this stuff on my shoulders myself as far as financial burden and the hard work on the ground. But there are a couple of people that I absolutely could have never done this without. And Verge was one of them, by inviting me to come to Lansing to open my business. And then for you to put in all the effort that you've put in over the years. Like I said, there's absolutely no way I would have done this without you. And I appreciate you. I consider you a friend outside of work, and I wish you all the best moving forward, buddy.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kevin. Yeah, just thank you so much. As an MICIA member myself, it's good to know your backstory. You didn't have to put it out there for the world, but it's good to know where you're coming from. I didn't really know as much about you. I did some research, but it's good to know that you are on the right side, of things. And as Ryan had mentioned, with lobbyists, not sometimes, it's one of those things like an attorney or something, right? Like, oh yeah, they're all bad. But as keep fighting the good fight. And I hope you do maintain develop some type of standard for lobbyists and how we treat politics in the future. And maybe we can get some real sensible things, not just in cannabis. I mean, it's all over the place. So, but thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
And Kevin, yeah, obviously, thank you very much for being on. Anything you want to say on your way out?
No, just that it almost sounds like it's a retirement speech. No, I just want to say how much I've enjoyed the journey with all of you and my special friend Robin Schneider, and how excited I am to continue to work with MICIA. And I think the growth potential of the association is phenomenal, and it'll be fun to come back and visit this in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and see how well everybody's doing. So thank you very much for having me on.
No, thank you for being on. I know we've been wanting you on for a while, so thanks for making the time and dressing up. And one thing, yeah, I'm real passionate about is, and there's a lot of us like making sure, as some people have tried to rewrite Michigan history and what really happened, and that hasn't gone well. I think people are accepting that we're gonna keep doing it and be loud, but I've heard some crazy stories about other lobbyists being the marijuana lobbyists, and that just, so anyone listening to this, that is not the case. It's always been and has been Kevin McKinney. So with that, everyone, we'll see you next week.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.